Very happy to be conducting my first non-snow-related briefing in 5 days. But I do have some of the heroes of the event with me here today. And I want to thank Commissioner Jackie Bray, who did an extraordinary job helping manage the response in Western New York and also the Watertown area, which, as you know, saw a record, historic for the record books amount of snow, and that's from someone who knows. About 82 inches in everywhere from my hometown of Hamburg to Orchard Park to other places up near Watertown. So it was extraordinary, and I could not have been prouder of how Steve Nagrelli, head of the state police, and our head of the DOT, Commissioner Dominguez, and everybody, the head of the Thruway Authority, everybody stepped up. And I'll simply say this: if you want to know what would normally be expected in a storm of that magnitude, go back to the photos of 2014, where there were thousands of cars stranded, people trapped for anywhere from 20 to 36 hours not that long ago. So I thank my team. We made a lot of tough decisions early on based on years of experience of how you shut down things before, sometimes even before the snow flies, and I'll tell you, it can be risky. You make the wrong call, there's criticism, but when you make the right call and you save lives, it is definitely worth it. So I just want to thank the people of those communities, but also the incredible team I have that got us through some tough times. And we are encountering tough times again, as I spoke about. This is deeply hurtful and painful to all of us, but particularly me as the governor of a state that I cherish. And the people who live within this are all part of my family. And any attack or a sense of insecurity or vulnerability that exists among them is something that is not tolerable, which is why we are approaching this whole crisis of domestic terrorism and hate crimes with a all-hands-on-deck coordinated government approach, but also relying on our community partners who are present here today and also signing legislation. Our work is not done. We're just beginning. Happy to take any questions.
Governor, can you put some meat on the bones of just what these bills do, as well as this grant program? When does this all start? Because everyone appreciated your soaring rhetoric, but we're sort of hungry for details.
No, it's not about rhetoric. That is the call to action. But what I followed up with was specific programs and signing a bill that mandates that anyone who's been convicted of a hate crime does not just walk away. They did their time and they go back, and they can go back to their seedy underworld and to re-engage with those sinister forces that are fomenting hatred on social media. I don't want that. I want there to be a stopping point where there's an education program, an intense program, where we de-radicalize people and get them to, we ensure the continued safety so we don't get repeat offenders. And so that's the idea behind the. And do you have any more details on how that rolls out?
I'm happy to talk
Okay,
about.
but also then the programs, we have over $50 million in grants right now. 46 has been allocated. A lot of this money, and I'll have the commissioner speak about it, it's intended to allow the not-for-profits, the organizations, the religious entities to have the resources they need to beef up their security. Is it lighting? Is it cameras? Is it more personnel? They are the ones who are the best judges of what will make them feel more secure, and the people they represent feel more secure, whether they're individuals going to a house of worship or they're going to another entity. So I would like the commissioner to address how that money's spent, but I want the word out. The money's there now. We went back in our budget last year and said, if it's resources are required, we'll put the money out there. And so we have until February 28th for applications, accepted on a rolling basis. Someone has a good idea, gets applied for. I said, get the money out the door. We're not waiting till almost March to do this. I'm very impatient. Commissioner?
So in terms of the grant funding, it's a total of $96 million. $46 million of it is federal funding that the state administers. That $46 million has been awarded to approximately 240 not-for-profits over the last couple weeks around the state. It's an additional $50 million of state dollars. The notice of funding opportunity, so the notice for not-for-profits to apply, went out 2 weeks ago now. That will be awarded on a rolling basis, and those applications close February 28th. The money for not-for-profits is used for really three things. The first thing is it can be used for hardening infrastructure. So it can be used to put barriers in front of a house of worship. It can be used to reinforce a security area. The second thing that it's used for is to train not-for-profit staff to identify whether or not they are being surveilled or targeted, so we can put them through specific training to help up their knowledge of what to look out for. And then for the first time over the last 2 years, the money can also be used to hire security guards if a not-for-profit chooses. So that's the grant money. In terms of the bill to mandate training and education, we know that people radicalize and we know that people can de-radicalize. And that we know that there are specific strategies that you can put in place both prior to an event, prior to an act of domestic extremism or hate that helps people off-ramped off of that radicalization process, but there's also strategies that you can put in place and that you must take after someone commits an act of violence in order to make sure that when they return to society, they're not continuing their radicalization process. And that's what this bill now mandates instead of makes optional for people. The other bill is the public awareness campaign that the commissioner can talk to.
We're so grateful to be getting support to launch a public awareness campaign across the state. Over the past year, the State Division of Human Rights has been hosting regional councils to hear about the hate incidents and bias incidents people in the 10 regions across the state have experienced. And there is such a great need for more awareness and education. So this bill will not only raise awareness, but also celebrate and embrace diversity, which is so important. And as the governor said, when you think about New York, you do think about New York being the most diverse place in the whole wide world. So now we're going to have a chance to actually create a public awareness campaign so that people know and can celebrate diversity, but also know what to do when they might be facing a hate or bias incident. Thank you.
Governor, you blame social media platforms for helping to foment hatred in New York and in the country. And if you take a look at the arrests that happened over the weekend, they made ample use of Twitter to post some hateful messages. I'm wondering what you think you would like to have social media platforms do, and is there any action that New York State can take to get the hate speech off the social media platforms?
This is an area of frustration for me, to be honest with you, because logic would dictate that these platforms should not have a single word of hate speech allowed or plans for the destruction of a church in New Zealand, which is what was the genesis of the inspiration behind the Buffalo shooter. I mean, this information is shared. You know, you live stream an incident, it has this effect on certain people who are open to that level of radicalization. There are federal laws in place, the Federal Communications Act, where speech is protected on social media. In the aftermath of the Buffalo shooting, where again, his plans were telegraphed, they were written, they were documented. Now, not on what we consider mainstream social media, but on these dark levels, was it Fortran? What? Discourse and others. So it's a deeper level, but immediately after that, I called upon the social media platforms to come talk to us. I also charged the Attorney General. Attorney General James conducted a study of the impact and what could be done, and she just announced those recommendations recently to find out what we can do within the context of this federal law. Is it Section 230? Whatever it is. Was it? 320. 320, okay. Section 320 of the federal law gives widespread protection to social media platforms and makes it almost impossible for us to do what we want to do, which would be to say, you cannot allow this speech. And in the event it occurs, you have seconds to take it down. Because as we've seen, now the Buffalo shooting was posted, but it did come down, I think, within 2 minutes. Within 2 minutes. Within 2 minutes, that spreads around the world. So the answer to the question is, one, I want them to take more ownership and have more responsibility, all these platforms, and I believe the legitimate platforms are undertaking their own surveillance, and they have people embedded and monitoring this, but it's this next level down that I'll have the superintendent speak to about how we deal with that level, where they won't come to the table and talk to anybody, and who even knows who's in charge of them.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. When we speak of social media and what we're doing, this is the dark web. This is cauldrons of hate. This is not where people are inspired to commit acts of domestic terrorism. They're encouraged. The how-to is shared, whether it's inspirational videos or actually live streams from previous events, where people are made martyrs for committing domestic terrorism. These cauldrons of hate have no place in society. Who thinks it's a rational or good idea to create a platform, allow a platform to exist where like-minded people can encourage each other to commit crimes, to commit domestic terrorism, fueled solely on their inability to accept others? It's not about tolerance. It's about acceptance. That is a crime. Not to be dramatic, but who thinks that's acceptable in our society? That we've created and we allow, by law, platforms like that to exist. That is a hurdle we must overcome in our society.
And I would encourage Congress, but the courts need to back it up if there are to be changes or any restrictions. Again, there are restrictions that are legitimate on speech. Everyone knows the case, not able to shout fire in a crowded theater. But it seems to me, this is more than a fire in a crowded theater. This is a wildfire burning out through society. And there is a way to stop it. And we need to have the moral clarity to stand up and call on those who have the power to make the changes, whether it's the Federal Communications Commission, but again, the courts are also the key. They have to back up because there's always legal challenges to any of these restrictions. But I dare say that as a government, we have an obligation, responsibility. It's part of what people expect from the government to protect society. We can't fully protect society as long as there's unfettered speech, inspiring acts of violence and crimes, and that is the challenge we're facing.
Governor, do you have any additional details as to how exactly the police tracked down these two individuals at Penn Station, sort of the chain of events that led them to know that they were at Penn Station and apprehend them there at the station? And then I have a follow-up.
Sure, I'll let the superintendent give you the chronology to the extent that he's able to within the limitations of an active case.
Governor, thank you for prefacing the fact that very limited can be shared at this time. I could tell you that it was a cooperative effort, both, and this is the beauty part of this. This is a private entity that also observed something on social media that they thought was traumatic, that could occur, something, and they made the right call. They called the New York State Police Intelligence Center that the state police runs, and they said, this is something on social media you should be aware of. Simultaneous to that, the state police and the FBI were also in those same social media platforms, saw the same posting. Working with our JTTF, that's Joint Terrorism Task Force members here in New York City, NYPD, our federal partners, the information was shared rapidly because that's how quick this information was developed and that's how quick the threat developed. But thank God for the work of very observant MTA officers that quickly realized who we were dealing with, observed the suspects and brought them into custody with no crimes being committed. Crimes that were just based solely on hate. But it was that exact collaboration and partnerships that you want as a society between the federal, state, local, private entities that resulted in this. So no one person, it's a group. Like the governor mentioned before, there's 20 million sets of eyes and ears out there that we're relying on to provide information to us. And that's the beauty of this particular case, that everything that Governor spoke about came together and resulted in this case being solved.
And on a slightly related note, there's been a lot of talk about how a number of Asian voters swung towards Republicans this past election cycle. Many of the voters we've talked to, specifically Chinese Americans, have cited public safety and hate crimes as one of their top concerns. And so I'm curious, given the election results, do you think Democrats could have done something differently around messaging, around engaging these voters on these issues that they were concerned about, specifically when it comes to public safety and hate crimes?
You always do autopsies after elections. I've had 14 now. You always examine, where there were successes, where there's more work to be done. And certainly, again, outside the political context, this is about making sure that people know that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe. And perhaps that message was not delivered, that this priority I spoke about here today has been there since August 24th, 2021. And we had many, many other events and opportunities to talk about this, but obviously that was not successful in certain communities who were hearing other voices and seeing other messaging and seeing other advertising with a contrary message about our priorities. We made sure when we made targeted changes to the bail laws that we ensured that all hate crimes and repeat offenders, but hate crimes were covered, again, under the previous bail laws. I suspect more could have been done to make sure that people know that this was a high priority of ours. But it's not about getting the votes, it's about making people safe.
Thank you. When I hear about this campaign, I think of those smoking ads we see on TV all the time. And a lot of them are funded by tobacco companies. There were big settlements 10, 15 years or so by various state AGs suing the tobacco companies. Why can't, I understand free speech is very tough to prosecute, but can't you go to social media companies and say, hey, you're facilitating this, there are bills that we have to pay, give us some money?
Novel approach. Let me take a look at that. I'm all about corporate accountability, and to the extent that the mainstream platforms, they do have, and they will be able to tell you the millions of dollars that they've invested into surveillance and monitoring, and because they know there is no tolerance. One more story that comes out that something was posted on Twitter or on social media and should have been seen by somebody is not something that they want either, is my understanding. It is the dark web. It is the uncontrolled dark web that will not succumb to political pressure or efforts to get them to pay up for advertising, I suspect, although I will always try.
Governor, two questions, please, about the hate crimes. Firstly, of the two defendants arrested, suspects arrested, one of them bail was given over the objections of the Manhattan DA. Wondering what you think of that.
That's not acceptable if it's a repeat offender. That we are going to be looking at our entire criminal justice system, and there are areas where there are shortcomings. Whether it's in, do we have support enough for the policing? Do we have enough out there for the judges? Is there enough support for our district attorneys? Is there enough support for the court system, which really literally shut down for 2 years during the pandemic? No jury trials held during that time. So a lot has been affected. This is our chance to reset and take a holistic look at the criminal justice system and make sure that no one slips through.
One follow-up on social media. While some people make it radicalized in social media, is it not true that you wouldn't have caught these guys without them having posted their plans on social media? Is it possibly not a wash of benefits and drawbacks to social media when it comes to hate crimes? I don't think these are the first people that were caught because they posted their plans on social media.
The question is, where are they radicalized? Are they radicalized in their families? Are they radicalized with their friends in high school? Or are they radicalized like the perpetrator in Buffalo, who sat for 2 years in his basement with nothing to do other than to be enthralled and enticed by these horrific images of crimes, again, where people are not just witnessing crimes but encouraged. So it's hard to know exactly that answer. Social media was viewed when it first launched onto the global scene as a place where we could share ideas. You could have efforts toward democracy, letting people see there are better ways. I think we had very high aspirations for the role of social media in stabilizing the global economy, creating greater connectedness, and promoting the values that we cherish here in a democratic institution. Maybe some of that was successful, but there was an awful lot of bad that came with the good. And we're seeing the aftermath of that, is that this is a platform, again, particularly the dark web, where people are learning the techniques, sharing information, inspiring each other, making martyrs out of each other, and this is what we are trying to deal with. And it's something that I don't think anyone could have foreseen in the early days of the social media, but it's with us today. We can't turn our eyes away from it. We have to just deal with the circumstances we have, and that's what today is about. This is what we've been doing for the last 10 months, and we're going to continue with the strong sense of purpose that's required to address this what is a crisis situation. Thank you, everybody.